All right, welcome to the show, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by. As always, I'm your co-host, Devin Kenzo. With us today, we have our host, Nigel Bennett, and our special guest today, full-time investor, career entrepreneur, and the author of Goodness is Courageous, which is his old book, which is out, and his new book, Simple Wealth, 6 Proven Principles for Financial Freedom, which will be available on January 2021. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dave. How you doing today?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, take it away.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic having Dave. Dave and I have known each other going quite far back till about 1996. Hey, Dave, I think it's 96 when we were joined the, well, I mean, I was in after you in the Entrepreneurs or the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, which is now called the Entrepreneurs Organization. And you were in probably a year or so before me, I think. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've been around. We've gotten a little grayer since. Our kids have grown up together.
Our kids have all grown up together, and we've traveled together, and we've learned a lot. We've been through some of the School of Hard Knocks together, and then the School of Not So Hard Knocks, and it's just been an incredible journey. And what's really amazing is that Dave wrote his first book a couple of years ago, where it's his life journey. He talks about his life journey, which is a fabulous book. And he has a new book, which Devin just mentioned, coming out in January, which is Simple Wealth. And I've read it, and I honestly believe that this is one of the best business wealth management books that there is out there, because what you've done is you've kept things, you've shared your stories, your real life stories, you've shared them, and you've kept it simple for people to understand, and which I just love. And I'm going to get a copy for all 3 of our kids that are in their 20s, and for their friends. I just think it's a great book. And there's a bunch of little things that I've highlighted out of your book, Dave. There's one little thing I don't know if it's the first chapter or one of the first chapters, but I really like this, where you talk about academic achievement being overrated, right? So I don't know if you want to talk on that just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one of the underlying principles that I address in the book is there's an overemphasis, I believe, that I became aware of on academic achievement and IQ.
Right.
As a predictor of success in life. And there's so many, we all have examples, in our friends and our extended circles of people who've gone to school for many, many years, really bright people who've done well academically, and then they struggle, and maybe they even get a good job, maybe even they get a great job, and then they work really hard, but after 10, 15, 20 years, they're struggling financially. Yeah. And you look at that, and then, but by the same token, you have another friend, we all often have them in our lives, who perhaps didn't do as well in school, never had post-secondary education, and for some reason, 20 years later, they're doing really well. Mm-hmm. And I had that experience as I talk about it in the book, as a young real estate agent, knocking on doors in a primarily Italian neighborhood in Ottawa. I'm from back east, and trying to get listings, asking, talking about the values of people's homes. And I get invited into some of these homes. And I was always really surprised, because the homes that I was invited into were first generation immigrants, Italian immigrants often. And they are very welcoming, very kind, very, friendly people. And I'd sit in these little duplexes or these little single family homes, and the lawns were always manicured. They always had big gardens. Their homes were clean. They're well managed. The people spoke broken English, often very poor English. Maybe the father, worked for the city, in the sanitation department all day, and mama stayed at home and took care of the kids. But yet they owned a duplex, or the single family house that I was sitting in. And then they owned another 2 duplexes, 2 or 3 blocks away. Yeah. And they're first generation immigrants. They're not first generation Canadians. They came to a new country, not knowing the language, often without any formal education. Yeah. Working in a sanitation department at the city, And they own a single family home, which is incredibly well maintained. The home is well furnished, it's clean, and they own a couple of rental properties. And I came from a home, my parents, we lived in rental accommodation. My father worked, he was a blue collar worker. He worked on the loading docks for the railway, and in a train yard, and paycheck to paycheck guy. We weren't poor. He's a union wages. So, I mean, didn't earn a lot of money, but it was enough money to feed his family. But we always rented. Lived in lower income apartments and duplexes, and moved regularly because we didn't own a home, and for whatever reason we moved regularly. And my mother worked most of the time when I was younger, but not all the time. And we were always paycheck to paycheck, and there's always bill collectors at our door. And here I was at 18, and I'm sitting there. I'm sitting in these living rooms, and I'm wondering, what do these people know and do? Because they're not, my parents had the benefit of being, multi-generation Canadians. They were born in Canada. They spoke English. They weren't any less intelligent than the Italian immigrants that I was visiting that day. And I met many other examples of those people over the years in other walks of lives. And so it always stuck with me, like, what is this? Like, is there a certain kind of intelligence? Is there a unique type of intelligence that's different than academic intelligence or IQ? And the more I thought about it and I reflected on my own life, a handful of years ago, is that I realized that there is a unique type of intelligence, that there's a financial intelligence. We've heard of IQ, we've heard of EQ, which is the emotional intelligence. Well, I advance the idea that there is actually a third type of intelligence, and it's financial intelligence, or your FQ. And that your financial intelligence is more a combination of emotional intelligence, and your emotional intelligence is more about self-awareness, self-discipline, the ability to sacrifice, self-sacrifice, your ability to communicate with people, understand how the world around you works. And those kinds of things, the ability to delay gratification, short-term sacrifice for long-term gain, those are all emotionally intelligent sort of qualities. And there's many others, depending on who you talk to. But so financial intelligence, I began to see is more really a combination of emotional intelligence and basic universal financial wisdom and knowledge, and not complex wisdom and knowledge, or nothing overly complex, just timeless truths, financial wisdom that's been around for the ages. So combining emotional intelligence and some very basic financial wisdom, and knowledge, those two together really is what I would call financial intelligence, or your FQ. Your
FQ, okay.
FQ.
And then you also talked about focus persistence is unstoppable, which I totally agree with that as well.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a big part of emotional intelligence, the ability to to be able to self-sacrifice, to be self-aware, self-aware being who am I, what am I, where do I want to go, right? And then self-disciplined. These are all, I mean, there are no shortage of examples of people with very high IQs whose personal lives are disaster areas. They don't have self-discipline. They don't have the ability to regulate their emotions, right? They don't have the ability to connect with people on a deeper level. They don't have the ability to stay on course. They're going left and they're going right. We all do that. But the good news, the exciting thing that I discovered about emotional intelligence versus your IQ is something pretty much you're born with. Most researchers and scientists would say your IQ is pretty much your IQ. If you work really hard at it, you can bring it up a little bit, but you're not going to bring. There's certain cognitive abilities that you either have or you don't, and that's pretty much, God created you that way, and get over it, right?
Right.
use what you've got, right? So some people get those. Like, I have friends who got really high IQs and they do really good academically, and I'm just amazed, at how that works for them. And some people don't. But your IQ, no matter how hard you work, and no matter how, and the sad part is a lot of parents, focus on that. But anyway, the IQ won't go up with much effort. or no matter how hard you work, will not be increased at all or hardly at all. Whereas your EQ,
But your EQ, yeah.
can be increased over time with effort, no matter who you are. So
Right.
the ideas of self-discipline, self-sacrifice, short-term sacrifice for long-term gain, self-awareness, these are all things that with, if you're motivated, right, you have to be motivated. You have to be self-motivated as well. But these are all qualities that can be nurtured and developed and grown over time with persistence, Nigel, to your point, with persistence and determination, right? So how much do you want it? So no matter how much persistence and determination I have, I'm not going to be able to increase my IQ by more than a few points, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah.
With persistence and determination, I can increase my EQ, my emotional intelligence. So now once my emotional intelligence is increased substantially, or as I grow it, if I'm at the same time embracing, researching, and I'm trying to understand what basic financial wisdom is, which is not complex stuff, and I summarize it well in my book.
Yeah.
Those two together are financial intelligence, and if you marry those two together, you'll be fine. You'll do
right. Right. So when you were sitting in these living rooms with these people and you were trying to sell whatever you're trying to sell, you noticed that they possibly, they owned their home. They were new immigrants. They owned their home, and they also had rental properties, right? Yeah. And so one of the points that you mentioned in your book, you said that a home is the only investment the average person can borrow against. I think that's key. I think that's a really key point that you mentioned there. So that's what these people are doing, is they're leveraging their house that they've got some equity in, and they're buying other properties and they're renting those out, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the fundamental for them. They probably came from Second Depression era, Second World War. Italy was occupied by the Nazis in the Second World War.
Yeah.
So people coming through that experience, probably actually if they didn't, perhaps their families experienced periods of time where they didn't know whether they're going to eat or not, where their homes and their goods and their chattels were taken away from them, perhaps, as a result of the occupation. So they came and they knew how really important it was for them to have a place of their own, for them to take responsibility and to sacrifice in order to do that. They sacrificed everything. They sacrificed being around friends and families. They sacrificed being able to stay in their own culture, to come to a place for a better life.
Mm-hmm. No. What about investing? Because that's always something that's really interesting. These days, there's so many of these hot stocks that people, want to jump on, like, SpaceX and Elon Musk and what he's doing, and all these Googles and all these things that you want to buy. People are going to go all in and push all their money into, one stock and take that big risk. What do you think about people, that? What's your philosophy on, or what have you learned? What's your wisdom that you could share about investments, what you've done wrong and what now you're hopefully doing right?
So being an entrepreneur, so the idea is you start a business. I'll just take a step back because I can only share my experience, right?
Sure.
So as an entrepreneur, you invest time, your energy, and your talent, and you start a business. Often, you're buying your shares in your private business for pennies a share. But your investment is your sweat equity, right? And your risk, your time, your effort. And that all turns out okay. And in my case, after 30 years, I was an overnight success after 30 years of hard effort. After a bankruptcy and a couple of near bankruptcies and many small businesses that opened and closed, eventually I opened one that did well. And I had all this money. So by the time I got to the point where I had some money to invest, I went, oh, geez, I'm talented. I'm smart, right? And most entrepreneurs get to that point, if they made any money, if they've done well, they have an inflated sense of their self. So when I turned the corner financially and I had all of this money to invest, I said, oh, geez, well, I'm just gifted. God anointed me. I'm a brilliant guy. I know how to do this stuff. So I'll start investing. So I had no training. in managing money, no training in, making money with money. I had lots of training in running businesses. So starting a business from nothing, organizing people around an idea, motivating them, working a business day to day, collecting money, borrowing money, doing all the things you have to do to run a day-to-day business. But those are all skills that are completely and totally separate from making money with money. If you meet the guys who are really successful at making money with money, they're very, very boring people. like I've spent the last 15 or 20 years hanging around with these guys. Like, no offense. Like, I mean, some of them, some of them are okay. Like some of them have a little bit of a personality, but the top guys at this, like, I mean, they're certified financial analysts. So like, these are accountants, type personalities, or engineers who decided to focus instead on making money with money. Okay. That's who these guys are. So think of Warren Buffett. Everybody talks about Warren Buffett. And I love Warren Buffett. I'm a disciple of Warren Buffett and his philosophy. And I'll share some of his stuff that you already have heard about, because everybody knows about Warren Buffett. Everybody's read one of his books or watched one of his YouTube videos, or a YouTube video done by someone who's watched videos.
Right. Yeah.
but anyway, think about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. A 90-year-old, 95-year-old guys, like, subtract all the money they've made from them. These are not exciting guys. These are guys who look at financial statements all day. These are guys who consider, a balance sheet an exciting thing. Like, I mean, how many people do you know consider balance sheets exciting things to look at, right? Like, I'm an entrepreneur and I didn't know what a balance sheet was for the first 15 or 20 years in business. Like, I mean, sorry, that's who I was, right? So my personality made me successful as an entrepreneur because I had people skills and I had motivation, all the rest of it. But I had no training as an accountant. I wasn't an analyst. I didn't go to university and study business. So yes, there are entrepreneurs that have those kinds of skills. And yes, God bless them. They're great and good on them. But if you go from being an entrepreneur, a regular guy who really is an entrepreneur, and then all of a sudden you got a bunch of money, what happens is you have this inflated sense of self and you say, okay, well, I made a bunch of money, so I'll be really good as an investor as well. And then you learn very quickly that what you know as an entrepreneur actually will hurt you as an investor. Because what makes you successful as an entrepreneur is your ability to take risks. It's your ability to believe in the unbelievable. It's your ability to see things that other people don't see. And it's also your ability to talk your way out of a jam. And it's your ability to kind of feel things out. Well, money doesn't work that way.
Right.
In the stock market, your personality doesn't come into play. Like, nobody really cares who you are or what you are. Your money has a job to do all by itself. It goes to work for you. And no matter how big you're thinking, no matter how positive your thoughts are, okay, the business you invest in is the business you invest in. So many things are out of your control. So assessing what to invest in and how to invest in is a completely different process. So the process of investing for me, I had to decide at some point, because when I had this money, I said, okay, well, where am I going to invest? How do I start this process? So I put a little bit of money into this deal. I put a little bit of money into that deal. A friend of mine starting a business, I'll put some money into his deal. And very quickly, I'd heard 1, 2, 3 years later, all my money that I've invested with these people vanishes. And I kind of go, well, what happened here? So then I say, okay, well, how does this work? So then I retreated and I said, okay, how does this work? And I looked at the stock market and I said, well, I'd always invested in real estate. So let's just take a step back. I'd always invested in real estate. I'd always done well in real estate because I started out as a realtor and as an entrepreneur. I needed a place for my business. So I bought an office building and I kept that office building. And business occupied that office building, so that went well. And I also bought and managed rental houses and those types of things along the way. And did other types of real estate deals. So real estate was something that I understood and I knew, okay, because I had some professional training in it. And with real estate, you get to use leverage. So that side of investing was my wheelhouse. So when I talked a minute ago, I was talking about being an entrepreneur, now all of a sudden having money.
Yes.
What I mean by that is that I had money that was more money than my real estate portfolio could absorb. So now all of a sudden, I've been a real estate investor most of my career. I wouldn't say I'm a professional investor, but I would say I'm not a novice because I've had properties, I've managed them, I've made some mistakes, but overall I'd done fairly well with real estate. And that was something I was good at because I could bring my entrepreneurial ability and skills to work in real estate because there's an operating component to real estate. You've got to deal with tenants, you've got to deal with, financing, you got to deal, there's an operating element to it. So entrepreneurial skills transfer fairly well over to
Right.
operating real estate. So I did okay there. And real estate's fairly simple. So it's not, you buy it, you hang on to it. If it's good,
Yes.
and you keep it, you should be okay.
I remember a bunch of years ago, you had bought some real estate, some commercial real estate, and then I ended up buying my office building there. And I remember you said to me, because I was all excited about this office, and because I've been paying rent for years and years and years, and I figured, oh my gosh, if I buy this building and then I lease out half of it, they're paying for everything. And I don't know, it was a no brainer, but I just didn't see it. I didn't see it. And then I said to you, I said, oh, I've got this. And you said to me, you said, Nigel, don't sell your real estate. Hold it for the long term. Like, just don't get that itch to sell it. Just hold it. And that's, it's probably been 20 years now since I've had that. And, and it was just such great wisdom, but I didn't know any better.
So I want to go back. So I kind of got off track there. So I don't want to get off track, but so yes, real estate is a great investment if you buy it and you hold it.
And you hold it.
Nobody knows what's going to happen in the short term, right? But long term, well-selected real estate has always proven to be a good investment. Well-selected, quotation marks. Okay, so you can poorly select real estate as well. So let's get back. So real estate is, for me, is a given. So for the listener, I want to make sure when you ask me about investing,
yes,
real estate is one category, but the category that I'm referring to as an entrepreneur having to learn about, because your question was, how to invest. As an entrepreneur, my entrepreneurial nature got me in trouble as someone who is now trying to invest in businesses or in the stock market. And so what happened to me is I said, okay, how am I going to deal with this? So I retreated completely from investing in startups, in venture capital funds, and other types of boutique or narrow investments. And I said, okay, I'm going to just invest in blue chip, large blue chip companies, blue chip being large cap blue chip companies, large cap being the biggest companies on the stock exchange, blue chip being the most stable companies. So I said, I'm going to step back, banks, insurance companies, Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company, Apple, those kinds of stocks. So I retreated and I said, I'm going to try that. And I'm going to listen. I'm going to try and make a study of this. And the more I studied the stock market, the more I looked at it, the more I realized that I wasn't suited. My personality profile, my experience, my talent, my natural gifts really weren't suited for me to be a stock trader, someone who goes into the market every day and buys and sells companies, and that I needed to have a conservative long-term approach. And then there was something I read in one of Berkshire, because I'm a Berkshire Hathaway shareholder and have been for probably 15 years or so. I read in one of the annual reports for Berkshire Hathaway, and it's Warren Buffett is a big fan of S&P 500 index fund.
Yes.
And for the average investor. And he believed that the average investor, the average person would do far better. And when he says the average person, he means 99% of the population. He means even not only individuals, but he means like pension funds, small investors and large investors would be served far better taking their money and investing it into an S&P 500 index fund and holding on to it forever than they would be trusting individual money managers to manage their money. And he made a very eloquent case for that in that particular letter, saying that the friction, the cost of buying and selling those shares,
yes,
and the risks associated with trying to pick sectors that you should
yes,
invest in the right companies within those sectors. So stock picking essentially, and then manager picking, because as an investor, you and I have to pick a money manager. If we're going to allow someone invest in the stock market and we're not going to, and we want to pick stocks per se, but we're not able to do it, we're going to have to hire a money manager to do that. So if we engage a money manager, now we are in, not only are we in the sector and the stock picking business, so we've got stock market risk, but we've got manager risk as well. Because your manager, even if you're lucky enough, Warren Buffett doesn't believe that 99% of money managers really deliver any value at all. He thinks that they're, for the most part, a waste of time.
Yeah.
And the numbers bear it out. 90, probably fully 98% of them will not deliver the same results as you'll get in an S&P 500 index fund. But anyway, so he says that you're better to put your money in an S&P 500 index fund than you are to try and pick the right manager, because those managers that you pick, let's say you pick that guy. Let's say you're let's say you are the lucky guy and you find that manager who can beat the S&P 500 index fund, okay? And let's say the S&P 500 index fund's returning, in my book, I use 7%, but, over many years, there's windows of times where it's achieved 9%, let's say, but less than 7%. So let's say your manager, you're one in 100 or 2 in 100 manager that you're lucky enough to find is able to beat the S&P 500 index fund, and he gets you, over a 10-year period, he's able to get you 9% instead of 7%. But the average money manager turns over about every 9 years. Money managers come and go, right? They've got a life, right?
Yeah.
They're going to retire. They're maybe going to move from New York to Sacramento. They get a better offer. They're now working at a big hedge fund instead of whatever. People's lives change, right?
Yes.
He retires because he's the greatest guy. Guess what? He made a ton of money, so now he doesn't need you anymore. Whatever. So money managers turn over about every 9 years. So now you're back to square one again, looking for the right money manager. So the wrong money manager can cost you nothing but money. The right money manager is going to get you maybe a couple of points more than the S&P 500 index fund is, right?
Yeah.
The S&P 500 index fund is 500 of the largest, most reputable companies on the stock exchange in America, which is the US dollar is the reserve currency of planet Earth. So it's the largest economy with the biggest, strongest businesses doing business all over the world. And Warren Buffett's point is that money managers and funds, mutual funds and hedge fund operators all compare their returns. The benchmark is the S&P 500 index fund. So if you get a report statement from one of these guys who runs a hedge fund or a venture capital fund or a mutual fund at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, they'll send you a little report and say, we were able to return 7% this quarter. And we're only 1 point less than the S&P 500 index fund, or we beat the S&P 500 index fund by 1 point. Their benchmark for their performance is the S&P 500. So they're bragging if they're able to beat it, and 95% of them aren't beating it. So why am I wasting all this time trying to find this one guy that is really hard to find that I'm not going to be able to keep forever anyway? That's so right. In my mind, so Warren Buffett,
and there's their fees too. They're the money manager. There's their fees,
which grinds down your return, right? Which has a huge effect on your return. So Warren Buffett's point, not mine, I'm just telling you what he says, is that you're better to buy an S&P 500 index fund and hold on to it forever than to try and find that 1 in a million or 1 in 100 money manager. He says he can't count on his hand the number of money managers that he thinks can beat the S&P 500 index fund on a regular basis.
Wow.
So he obviously counts himself as one of those guys,
right.
But clearly he is. Anyway, so from my perspective, I'm not trained for it. It's not my personality profile. I don't want to stare at a computer screen every day watching gyrations of stocks going up and down, trying to figure out whether I should buy or sell something. So I think there's a little bit of brilliance in the humility of understanding what you're good at and what you're not. So
Yes.
I think that if you're not good at something, being humble enough to admit that you're not good at it, and that you're not going to be the best person to do it, and then finding the best way to taking yourself out of the picture and staying out of the picture, that discipline to do that, I think that's a good definition of financial intelligence.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you in the past of this discussion here is that real estate. I mean, you've been very successful in real estate because you're a real estate guy, but that's kind of a core
Yeah.
thing. Another thing is investing in something like the S&P 500, a large blue chip portfolio. And the third thing that I think was being an entrepreneur and having your own thing going, because you're in charge of your own destiny. This is what I'm hearing you say. You're in charge of your own destiny, the ups and downs, the wins, the losses, things like that. Hey.
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of investing, absolutely. But I mean, I look at our entrepreneurial exploits as vocation, right? That's our vocation. That's what we do, right? So some people have a job they go to. Devon's an actor, Hollywood famous, and working with Emilio Estevez right now.
There you go.
And anyway,
so go ahead.
So I mean, we all have our talents, we all have our skills, right? And so I think being an entrepreneur is a vocation, right? So you and I, Nigel, have that as a vocation. And we happen to do okay at it. A lot of entrepreneurs work their asses off and they work their butts off. And they don't have a lot to show for it after 20 years. But it's their job. They make a salary at it along the way. And the question is, how do you manage that money that you do make along the way?
Right. Exactly.
And so I would champion the entrepreneurial experience and encourage people into that experience if it's for them.
If it's for them.
I hear the entrepreneur has been elevated to mythic proportions. He's been set up as a hero of some kind in our culture. When I started out 40 years ago, nobody knew what an entrepreneur was. The word entrepreneur wasn't even in common usage when I was in my 20s. Here I am in my 60s, and the entrepreneur is some type of a cultural hero now. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Everybody is an entrepreneur, it appears.
Everybody is, these days.
And it's just kind of like, okay, but as we well know, Nigel, most people aren't entrepreneurs. It's a unique personality combination. I think you have to have a learning disability of some kind. you have to have ADD.
You got it.
You have to have some kind of an issue. Pretty much 50% of all the entrepreneurs I know, if they weren't entrepreneurs, they'd be in prison or they'd have some other type of issue, right? So,
well, Devon and I also have another thing which we have with Kevin Lawrence, who's my coach. It's called giftadd.com. So we're going to be coming back to interview you about Gift ADD. It's the whole premise of it is that people with ADD and dyslexia aren't freaks. It's actually a gift. And
it is, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we'll be circling back around to talk to you about that.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I got lost. I went down a rabbit trail on your question. Where were we again?
I can't remember, but what I'll do is I'm going to throw it over to Devon to see if he's, if we're going to transport back in time a little bit here. Hey, Dev?
Yeah, sure. So I know you were talking about like being humble and holding yourself accountable, but what would be kind of your top words of wisdom that you could give to somebody, to a younger self? Like if you were going back to yourself, your 24-year-old Dave, or even just the youth of the age today, what would be your words of wisdom?
Now obviously around the subject of managing your personal financial life.
Absolutely.
Financial success is a long game. Most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year, and they underestimate what they can achieve in 20 or 30. Okay, so financial success, financial independence is a long game. Okay, so it's all about doing the right things over and over again, day in and day out, adopting healthy principles and embracing those. Financial success is a long game, not a short game. So embrace that idea. And as a young person, when you're in your 20s or you're 30ish, it's hard to even imagine that one day you'll be 60. Like, I mean, believe me, it happens. It happens quick. I'm 60. I turned 60 this year, and it happens a lot faster than you think. And you turn around, you go, holy smokes. And a lot of people our age look back and they go, oh man, if I'd only done this, or if I'd only done that. Right. And there's a few only dones. So that's number one, right? So that. And then embrace short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. You know, a lot that messaging has gotten lost. Our parents, my parents, and our grandparents lived through the Great Depression, Second World War. So they came out of that changed, right? They came out of that, their behavior, the idea of saving and never throwing anything out, and thrift, and financial discipline, and sometimes not in entirely healthy ways. So this culture, your generation, has been raised at a time of economic growth and expansion, and without the pandemic, taking the pandemic out of it, we've had some ups and some downs, but by and large, I mean, we've had some cycles in the market and the economy, like the subprime crisis and a couple of others. But in all of those cases, things have bounced back and the economy has just continued to roar on. But anyway, I guess I say, persistence and determination. How many is that? 2? What did I give you?
It's 2.
Yeah. So if I had to summarize, and then the third one, I guess, would be, to win the game, you got to stay in the game. And the way that you stay in the game is you gotta live your life to the fullest. You gotta love your wife or your spouse or your significant other. Enjoy life. Get exercise. Do the things that are important to you. Have fun. It can't be all work, because if it is, you'll get burnt out, and it will become none of what you're doing. The short-term sacrifice thing will become you won't last, right? So you've got to make sure that you're living your life in a full, balanced way. So to win the game, you got to stay in the game. I tell my kids this. So if you play hockey, if you're a young man and you're working hard, join a beer league and get out and play hockey and laugh with your bros and have a beer. If you ski, if you hike, if you whatever your hobby is. If you play crokinole, play crokinole. But you got to do something. You got to have a life beyond watching Netflix at night. And it's not easy sometimes because life is busy. But push yourself out of your comfort zone and stay engaged with something that you like that brings you some life. Because it's not all about making money. That's a long game. That's why it's a long game, right? It's you got to make sure you got to stay in the game with a smile on your face, because we all have today, right? Today is all we got, and tomorrow's promised to nobody. So this strategy that you have for your finances, it's important to have it, right? But to understand that this is the gift. Today is the only gift you got that you can count on, right?
Yeah. I think of it as like a life rhythm. Like our life rhythm, because you're working and you're working hard, but you also have to be over here, and it's almost like a rhythm. It's almost like a dance.
Yeah.
And you just got to stay in that rhythm and stay in the flow. Once you're in that flow and that sweet spot, nothing can stop you. Because if you've got your personal connections and your family, and you're giving back your whatever philanthropy, if you're helping, giving, and then your work side of it, and you've got that all in this flow, nothing can stop you.
Yeah, and our flow has been thrown off this year. All of our flow. At least my flow has.
It's a throw now.
Yeah, my flow is like I'm in my backyard in my home office now. Like I'm kind of going. So I'm used to traveling a lot and seeing lots of great people doing stuff in different parts of the world and helping different organizations, and that's a big part of what we do. And all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah.
Now I'm just in my back office here, writing books, doing podcasts. So I've had to try and figure, okay, I'm going to start playing guitar again because I'm going bananas. I got to do something creative.
Yeah. Come on over. I got a couple back here.
There you go. Yeah. Let's get a jam on. Yeah. Socially safe jam, by the way.
All right. And then as our wrap for our show for today, thank you all so much for listening. Of course, pick up David Ash's new book, Simple Wealth, 6 Proven Principles for Financial Freedom, which will be hitting the shelves on January 2021. Thank you so much, Dave, for coming on the show. This was an awesome show I think we had today. It's going to be just super beneficial for everyone to listen to this. People who are young entrepreneurs or young investors, well, you know, they're kind of learning your mistakes that you've made so they don't have to make them in the future. And of course, seasoned entrepreneurs, also, you're just a well of knowledge. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Great. Take care.
All right.
Have a